Solis is the newest defender in Rainbow Six Siege, and in today's video we're going to be discussing how you should play her. We're going to be discussing everything from her loadout to her gadget and certain strategies you can run with her. Be sure to use the chapters to skip around the video at your leisure, but now we're going to start off this video by talking about her loadout. The main thing you'll see 90% of Solis players running is the P90, which is a pretty solid SMG that she has that has minimal damage, but a high mag capacity and fire rate to make up for that. She unfortunately doesn't have any zoom optics, but it's not exactly like she really needs any. The recoil of the P90 is pretty easy to get down, and for all those reasons remains a fitting weapon for her playstyle. You might find yourself with Solis having to spray through a lot of walls at gadgets that you can see, and so having a high mag capacity is definitely going to help out with that. As far as secondaries go, she only has one option, which is the SMG11. The SMG11 is the SMG11. I'm sure you don't need me to explain why it's a great weapon. So long as you can master the recoil of it, it's a fantastic weapon to fall back on, and even for a lot of players suffices as a primary weapon too. And given that leads me onto the shotgun. Solis's other primary option is the ITA-12L, which unfortunately on paper is one of the worst shotguns in the game. But as I mentioned before, that's not necessarily going to matter to you if you can rely on the SMG11 to do the work. The shotgun is a great weapon to bring if you intend to do any site setup or even some off-site rotations. However, Solis also does get impact grenades, and so I'd only recommend bringing the shotgun if you're confident with the SMG11 and you intend to do some destruction for which 2 impact grenades will not suffice. As we just briefly touched on, Solis's secondary gadgets include impacts and the bulletproof camera. Given everything we've mentioned already, I think you can see that I'm leaning more towards impacts than the camera, especially since you'll spend a lot of your time with your gun down using her gadget, and so you don't want to add to that time by having a camera that you need to periodically check as well. However, that's not to say that the camera isn't a good option, just personally not what I would bring. If you do bring it though, I would recommend bringing the shotgun so that you've at least got some destructional capability. That about wraps up everything to do with her loadout, so let's move on to her special gadget, which is the Spec.io electronic sensor. This gadget is a visor that Solis can toggle on, which allows her to see attacker electronics through walls. However, unlike characters like IQ or Jackal, she has to put her gun away to do this. You can have this gadget up for a hefty amount of time. However, if you do use the scan feature, which will red ping all of the gadgets in its view for your teammates, you will be locked out of it on a cooldown, which is not something that you're going to want to do very often. This makes her gadget especially reliant on communication. The gadget has a vision range of up to 15 meters, and as far as for what it can see, well, it's probably quicker to list what it can't see. Solis is able to locate pretty much any electronic gadget that the attackers can use, and she can even see these when they are still in the hands of the attacker, something which her attacking counterpart IQ cannot do. Now that you have a decent description of how this gadget works, let's move on to how you should use it. Solis is all about garnering enough information on the attackers so that you and your team can get an idea of what their plans are and thus react accordingly. For that reason, she has a playstyle that sort of resembles Pulse, in that she will spend the majority of her time without her gun up, looking around through walls to try and gather intel for the team. And so for that reason, you're not going to want to spend 100% of your time using the gadget and looking around. Periodically, you're going to want to swap back to your gun and defend yourself. To play Solis effectively, you're going to at least need a tiny bit of map knowledge to be able to get the most out of her gadget. Since most of the time you're looking at stuff through walls, it would help to know what exactly is on the other side of that wall, something that map knowledge is going to provide you. As mentioned earlier, the idea with Solis is to paint a visual picture for your teammates on what the attackers are doing, and she can even begin doing this in the prep phase. During the prep phase, if you activate your ability, then you should be able to see which direction drones are coming from. This can help give you an idea of where the attackers are spawning, and by extension, the strat that they might be going for. Not only this, but of course she can see where the attackers leave their drones, which can tell you which rooms the attackers intend to take first. Once the prep phase is over and this information has been forwarded to your team, it's time for Solis to begin playing around this. Since by this point Solis should have at least a vague idea of which direction the attackers are pushing from, Solis should position herself accordingly, ideally away from the action. Now that might piss off a few of you fraggers out there, but it's really not a good idea for Solis to be taking engagements that early because of the risk of her dying and then the risk of her gadget not amounting to anything. Add on to that Solis is great for late round flanks, something that we will cover later in this video, and you can see why Solis staying alive for as long as possible is favorable. Now that you're in a good position, it's time for you to start scanning. At this point in the round, you're mainly going to be wanting to focus on the most important areas of the map, especially areas that are going to use a lot of gadgetry from the attackers. These areas could involve places like the main wall, where Solis can get a lot of mileage out of her gadget by assisting the bandit or Kaid with tricking by letting them know which side of the wall the attackers are going for. Other areas like this could be runouts, in which Solis can detect any air jabs or claymores that could be preventing someone from doing so. By this point in the round, the defending team should be getting a lot of info from Solis on what kind of plans the attackers are setting up for. However, as the attackers draw closer to the site, Solis gets presented with a couple of options. Option 1 is to remain off site with the intention of being able to deny the plan, whereas option 2 involves Solis going on a flank, intending to disrupt the attackers before they even reach site. So then the question comes down to which should you choose, and frankly it comes down to weighing weighing up your options and the viability of each strategy in the moment. So let's talk about that. What needs to happen for you to be able to deny a plant? Well, firstly and most obvious, you need to have a destructible floor or ceiling so that you can deny the plant. That one's pretty obvious. But you also need to consider the player count. If, for example, it ends up coming down to a 1v1, then obviously denying the plant is a good option, as you won't need to expose yourself to the attacker and potentially lose your life. However, if it's something like a 2v3 and your teammate is sat on site about to be pushed, then a flank that could potentially take out two of those enemies is going to bring you closer to a win than killing the planter and letting your teammate be killed by the other two would. You also need to consider that they will probably send down an enemy to come and clear you out, and you can't deny plant and take out that enemy at the same time, so it really does just come down to how many enemies are left on the board and how much time they have left to plant. If the attackers are left with only a few seconds left to plant, then obviously denying said plant is going to win you the round, and so is a great option. But being in that position that late in the round should be a situation that you find yourself in, and not one that you should put yourself in. And so I think in most cases going for a flank is probably the better option. Solis is able to pull off a late round flank much better than a lot of operators due to the amount of intel that she can gain on what kind of flank setups the attackers have. Flanking with Solis basically consists of repeatedly checking your gadget as you near choke points such as corners and stairs to gain an idea of what the attackers have watching their backs. You should be on the lookout for gadgets such as claymores and air jabs, as well as active flank drones, while also making sure to switch back to your weapon occasionally to avoid getting caught with no gun out. It should be noted that if you see a drone, it could be worth not shooting it and instead waiting for it to disappear from your sensor, meaning that no one is watching it and you're safe to push on through. While at the same time looking out for any phones which indicate that an attacker is currently on cams and potentially a free kill. Just remember to make sure that if you do manage to squeeze past any gadgets without shooting them, let your team know about them so they don't eventually run into them themselves. Now we're going to quickly run through everything we've covered about how to play Solis in this video. Firstly is that your job is to garner as much information on the attackers as possible throughout the round, and relaying this to your team until everyone has a decent idea of the enemy's next move. Your job shouldn't necessarily be to frag out, and instead should be more focused on intel gathering for at least the first half of the round. You can do this in areas where you think the attackers will push from, or just common attack points such as main walls or hatches. Staying alive with Solis is important as she is incredibly powerful in the late game scenarios such as late round flanks or plant denial. And remember that Solis will be a high priority for attackers to clear out given this late round potential that she has, and so be sure to be ready to defend yourself when the time comes. But that is just going to about cover everything for this video. If it did help you out, then please do be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. You can find my socials on screen or down in the description, but that's it from me. I will catch you in the next video.